Welcome back. We're going to get into what happened this morning in committees. Also, we want to talk about the tax cut. And in order to get the big facts on this stuff, we got to have Brian Almon with us. So, Brian, good to see you. Looks like you're down there in one of the wings of the Capitol.
Yeah, I'm down here in the garden level. I brought my homeschool pod here for a field trip. They got to see the Senate in session, got to see the Senate floor, courtesy of Senator Lenny. And they're having their lunch, and I've just stepped away to talk about legislation.
Hey, fantastic. Okay. Well, this morning, speaking of ballot initiatives earlier with Michael Angeletta, one of the ballot initiatives that was run here a few years ago expanded Medicaid in this state, which has ballooned the budget. And then this morning, Representative Vanderwoode presented a bill. So let's look at this real quick.
Is a repeal of Medicaid expansion, in case those of you who haven't read it and might be surprised by what's in it. I got sabotaged this morning. My computer wouldn't go on. So I was trying to get some other information. So committee, I would just ask that you introduce this RS for further discussion.
All right, so that was short and sweet there, Brian. He didn't bring many of his talking points with him, but can you walk us through a little bit of what you know about this?
Well, I know, obviously, Medicaid expansion, it was passed by the voters via initiative. More than 60% voted for it in 2018. However, a lot of that was based on promises that have turned out not to be true, saying that it would be very cost effective, for one, and now the budget has ballooned. Idaho alone, I think the total budget for Medicaid expansion is now over $1 billion. And Idaho's portion of that is a significant chunk. One of the promises is that it would have been mostly federal money. It's basically free money, which, as you know, first of all, it's not free because the federal government's printing that money, which is causing inflation and causing the national debt to fall on our great-grandchildren someday. It is a problem. And if it keeps growing at the rate it's growing, it's going to bankrupt the state. There's also the moral idea of why are we subsidizing healthcare for people who are able-bodied and who can afford to work. Those are big questions. Representative Vanderwoode brought a bill 2 years ago. It was House Bill 123. I remember that. It was easy as 123 to repeal Medicaid expansion, but it didn't go anywhere. We'll see if this one has legs. Obviously, we have a more conservative legislature. Last year, Representative Jordan Redmond had a bill to put some sideboards on Medicaid expansion and repeal it if those thresholds were not met. And that incited a bunch of people to come and testify in the Health and Welfare Committee, saying that if this passed, then they'd lose their insurance, they'd die, which, tells you the problem with becoming reliant on government in the first place. But expect the same thing this time. There's going to be a flurry of people coming out to say that you absolutely cannot get rid of this.
Right. Which is, preposterous. We've lived before without it. And like you said, if you're able-bodied and such, there's, there's a big discussion to be had about this, but there's one thing that we cannot sustain this type of expansion with how much it costs and how much, like you just said, we get from the federal government to keep it going. So we'll keep tabs on this stuff. This is a good bill, and something we definitely need to tackle here. Very good. Well, on that note, there's also a tax cut in the ether here. We talked a little bit about this, but this morning over on X, we published week 3 of the Almon recap, which covered this this tax cut here. Yeah, here's the article up. That's up there now. Walk us through a little bit. We know that there's somewhere of $240 million in an income tax cut, but there were a couple other points in this bill that I think we should highlight.
So yeah, there's a couple interesting components. The biggest one is a reduction of the income tax, both for individuals and corporations, from the current 5.695% down to 5.3%. Now that number's been going down further and further and further each year. It used to be up above 6% just a couple of years ago. First, they flattened it. They brought individual and corporate tax rates to the same level, and now they've been lowering them together. There's been some reports that neighboring states have income tax rates as low as 2 or 3%. So getting that lower is not only good for us as citizens, it's good for cutting government spending, but it's also good for business and wanting, bringing people to Idaho to actually work and start businesses and, do commerce. So that's the biggest chunk. Speaker Moyle says that will essentially be $240 million of tax relief going back to the people of Idaho. But there's 2 more components of it. There's something about veterans. Last year, there was a bill to exempt veterans' retirement from income taxes. It didn't pass. I think some people were concerned about tax carve-outs. But this would essentially do that. It would say that if you're a veteran and you're disabled, then your retirement pay is not going to be taxed by the state of Idaho. If you're a veteran and you're working, maybe you're, in your 50s or 60s, you served your time in the military, you came here to retire, but you want to keep working, you want to go to work somewhere, your military retirement pay will not be taxed under this bill. And then for certain veterans, I think up to 62, 63, and 64 years old, they won't have their benefits taxed at all. So that's a invitation for veterans who served our country to come retire in Idaho and maybe go to work in some industry and provide their skills and experience there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I'm on the Milton Friedman train when it comes to cutting taxes. I understand some may argue it's a carve out for some and not for others and that sort of thing. But man, if we can just start cutting, I think it's a good thing, and we got to start it somewhere. So I like the idea of that. And then there was also no capital gains on selling your gold or precious metals. Was that the other one?
Yeah, no capital gains taxes on selling gold or silver. So if you have a big collection of gold and you sell it to a friend or sell it to Money Metals Exchange here at Eagle, then you're not going to have to pay the capital gains tax on that. Right. Which, according to the speaker, the veterans benefits, the veterans exemptions would be another $10 million, and then the no capital gains is very small, just another $1 million. But that brings the total tax relief in this bill to $253 million, which is a nice big number, $250 million.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear. And again, one of these things too that you lay out in the article is that when we are taxing the people less, that means there's less revenue for the government to spend. And so we're not expanding, we're not creating new programs, we're not, doing all sorts of things that just make government a big behemoth, right?
Right, and that's exactly what Representative Josh Tanner said a couple weeks ago in JFAC, when the governor sent his staffer to come present the budget, and it had about $100 million in tax cuts and then $400 million in new spending. Representative Tanner said, "Why don't we switch that? Why don't we do $100 million in new spending, but $400 million in tax cuts, give that money back to the people?" And of course, that is exponential. As I wrote here and as I wrote on Gem State Chronicle yesterday, is cutting taxes is not only giving money back this year, but that means there's less money for the government to spend next year, because they're like a goldfish filling up as much space as they can. If they have the money, they're going to find a way to invest it in something. So it's best to just give it back to the people.
There you go. Very good. Okay. Well, on the topic of medical freedom, Representative Bruce Skog was in that same committee that Vanderwood was in. I think it's probably the Health and Welfare Committee, right? and he had a bill that I thought we had passed before, but apparently not. Let's watch his presentation.
Medical Ethics Defense Act that protects the conscience rights of healthcare professionals and entities. It protects them from being forced to participate in non-emergency procedures that would violate their sincerely held religious, moral, or ethical beliefs. It also protects healthcare professionals from discrimination when they exercise their conscience rights. Essentially, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't do any harm to the patient. There is no fiscal impact, always my favorite part of bills. And this legislation protects patients and their care by protecting them from discrimination when the providers report violations of the law. This bill has been around in different forms in the past, but didn't get very far. And that's, I believe, because not all of the stakeholders, or as many as possible, were brought into the discussion. I've done that. I can't get to them all. But there are things here, as a former employer, that I made sure were in here that protect employers, but also to protect the conscience rights of our healthcare workers. There are people not going into healthcare because of what is going on and the discrimination. And you think, well, is that really going on, Bruce? Well, yes, discrimination has been on the rise these past years. 1 in 3 Christian medical students experience discrimination or pressure during medical school to violate their sincerely held beliefs. I have personal experience with that in my family by marriage. He's now a doctor, a good internist. But when he was in medical school, he was constantly pressured against his religious beliefs, and that was against abortion. He was always pressured to refer for abortion continually. He had to be quiet on his beliefs on different medical, ethical beliefs that were his core beliefs, or he would have been harmed in his grades. And he was held back in some ways, but now he's
Yeah, so there's a good point there that I wanted to make sure Representative Scott got to get out there on the program, that this is exactly what this bill is designed to help protect.
Yeah, I can't really add any more to what he said. You know, we all know that this has been going on, where in order to pass through various systems like medical schools, you have to agree to the reigning ideology in our culture, which is, you know, abortion and transgenderism and all those things. So being able to pass a law to protect Idaho citizens from that kind of discrimination, I think is good. It's not only helps them, but it helps their future patients as well. Because how many people are pushed out of medical school, or, you know, kept from going there in the first place because they don't want to be part of that system? Well, if,
Right.
you know, they knew they had those protections, then maybe we'll have more good doctors and nurses and medical professionals.
Absolutely, and if this is a good way to encourage more moral people to join the medical field, I don't think that's anything to scoff at. Especially when you read the reports that there's doctors are fleeing Idaho because they're not allowed to kill babies. That seems to be what's going on. We know that's not true.
Yeah.
Ah, boy. All right. Well, we're going to be watching that one. That's a good one. Now, on the flip side, Dan Foreman earlier this week was in committee with a similar bill that would protect, but on this side, protecting patients and their medical freedom and their medical rights. So let's watch a little bit of that. I want everybody to see it.
But the rights of patients should be codified, and they currently are not with any degree of specificity. Now, many of my constituents have voiced valid concerns about their interface with the healthcare system during the pandemic. This legislation establishes some seminal patient rights, including a patient cannot be denied treatment for refusing a vaccine. A patient has a right to informed consent with respect to medications and medical treatments. No patient shall be administered any experimental drug without informed written consent. This legislation directly supports Idaho Code 39-9003, which is the Idaho Health Freedom Act, which states people are free to choose health care without government interference. This legislation has been reviewed by the Attorney General's office, and a determination was made this bill does not conflict with provisions in either the state or U.S. constitutions. The Idaho Attorney General may seek injunctive action against violators of this proposed legislation under Idaho Code 67-1405 sub 15. And with that, Madam Chair and Committee.
Very good. That bill got printed, Brian. But again, these are things that I thought we already passed, but they just seem to stall out. But I mean, are you hopeful for some of these bills with our new makeup this year?
I'm really hopeful this year. I want to see a lot of these things go through. Sometimes they do go through, but then we find out later that there's loopholes. Other times they go through partway and then they get stalled somewhere, such as in Senate State Affairs. But yeah, hopefully the fact that we're actually hearing these, they're being introduced, they're being printed. Obviously, I think we, the people, need to keep the pressure on our legislators, especially committee chairs, to make sure that these actually get heard. And then when they're heard, we need to go testify. We need to remind these people that this is an issue that is important to the people of Idaho. Being able to go get health care without having them require things like experimental vaccines. That is important to the people. And
Yeah.
the people need to remind the legislature, because sometimes I think they might forget exactly what our priorities are.
Exactly, folks. Exactly. And that's why we do this show. We want you to know that these bills are back, because you might have thought, I thought we already did that. I saw you guys talk about this on last year's show and it didn't go through. You're right. It didn't go through. So contact your senator, contact your representatives and tell them to support these bills and just follow along, follow Gem State Chronicles reporting on these bills, and just you got to keep tabs, folks. You got to keep tabs. Show me your comments. Send in your voicemails. We'll send them along. We'll, however we can get the message going, we will. Another bill that we thought went through was Tammy Nichols' anti-swatting bill. Or what does this bill do?
Swatting is the act of basically calling in a false report in order to scare someone or even hurt them. So let's say there's some content creator, YouTube streamer that you don't like what they're doing. So in the middle of their show, you call the police and tell them that you're in this house, you have a hostage, and there's going to be killing. And so the police arrive with the SWAT team ready to go save lives, and they're itchy trigger fingers, and bad things might happen. People have actually been killed doing this.
Yeah.
And right now, the only, as Senator Nichols said, the only provision in there in the law now is filing a false report, which is a pretty low-level crime. But this bill recognizes that this is a specific thing that people do that is very malicious, that can get people hurt or killed, and therefore there need to be higher penalties in the law for it.
Yeah, especially in Idaho. I mean, can you imagine if in the middle, and this doesn't even happen, this could happen to you in the middle of the night if somebody doesn't like you, Brian. I can call in and say, hey, that guy Brian, he's beating his wife and he's got his kids being held by a knife. You should go over there right now with guns, and the SWAT team will show up and bust through your door, and you're fast asleep. You don't know what's going on. You think someone's coming into your house, and you grab your firearm, and the next thing you know, there's mayhem and worse. So this is a big deal, and it has happened, and it's tragic. So we applaud Senator Nichols for bringing this forward here.
I believe last year's bill got stalled on the House side, so hopefully this one gets through both sides and gets signed.
Yeah, very good. We got stalled in committee. We got to find out which committee that was in. I'm going to investigate that. We'll find out. Okay, the final thing here was a good friend of ours on X, the orange jacket man, Matt Jensen. Is that his name?
Yep. He's a character down here in Boise.
Yeah, he is a big BSU football fan and everything, but he's got an X account that he's had for years, forever, probably since it first started. Mm-hmm. And he came to testify in support of Senator Lenny's anti-SLAPP legislation bill, because he felt like this is something that would help protect him, because he's had, well, let's listen to him tell it.
Lifelong Idahoan. However, I'm also more commonly known as a contradictory personality on Twitter, Orange Jacket Guy, i.e. not a lawyer. My Twitter bio reads, BSU superfan and commenter proclaimed by Adafruit's Lamore Freed as the best Matt Jensen, authority in political tomfoolery, technically an IDGOP officer, and then I list my pronouns as me and my. While staying within lawful and ethical bounds on that platform, I have, however, been threatened with legal action upwards of 65 times since my account creation back in mid-December 2007. And yes, for everyone's information, I've been on that platform much longer than probably anyone else in this building. At least 44 of those legal threats were from people who were either known to be or alleged to have been in the state of Idaho. It is, in case it is unclear exactly why I'm mentioning this, it is because I definitely was not saying anything that should ever rise to the level of any legal action being necessary. And yet, because I'm a little bit loud on that platform, people felt the need to extend such a threat anyway. And while nobody has yet gone as far as to make the process the punishment for me, it is only a matter of time before somebody dumb enough or bent out of shape enough actually does it, especially with what I've been seeing in #IDPOL in recent years. Our citizen part-time legislature can do something about it before it becomes a problem for myself and a whole lot of other people. As it's probably already been mentioned, the process is often the punishment made against someone who has offended or otherwise angered another online. The process is the punishment when an innocent person is saddled with the drains on their time and resources just to defend themselves in court, all over mean tweets. So please, help us before the situation gets any worse, because SLAPP lawsuits are an end run around our free speech rights and a perversion of the process. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions, if any, Mr. Chairman.
Well done. Well done. Yeah. Well done, man. Well done. And that's the thing.
Can't really add to that. That's that he pretty well lays it out.
Yeah, and you and I are both on social media, and you've had your run-ins with folks that say you're defaming them or you're saying something derogatory, whatever. But at the end of the day, is it enough to sue somebody over?
Well, obviously we both know people who have been sued over that sort of thing. Thankfully, it's never happened to me, but you never know when it might happen. And people use that as a tool. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. They use it as a tool to keep you out of the discourse. To shut you up, essentially, like Jensen said, to make an end run around your constitutional rights. And of course, as Senator Lenny explained, this bill doesn't change laws regarding defamation or slander or libel. If you do those things, if you knowingly and maliciously tell lies about somebody in order to damage their reputation, they can sue you and win if a jury believes that you did it knowingly and maliciously. All this anti-SLAPP bill does is it creates a tool for the judge to look at the case right off the bat and say, is this frivolous? Is this designed to shut up someone's free speech? If so, dismissed.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Perfect. Very good. All right, Brian, we're going to let you go. Let everybody know where they can follow you and what you're working on.
GemStateChronicle.com, as usual. I've attended the event with Idaho Family Strong and Alliance Defending Freedom earlier this week, so I'm going to write about that and what you can do to get involved with social bills, traditional family bills, how you can be engaged in that. And, of course, follow me on Twitter at GemStateBrian.
Fantastic. All right. Very good, sir. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, you too, Matt.